this year. I think it's really important that this flagship conference takes place, and the timing is perfect, as the coming months will be absolutely key in shaping the future of Europe. So warm congratulations to the organisers. In order to set the scene of the very intense and high-quality programme ahead, let me share some thoughts on the current situation and economic outlook. Little did we know when we met at Flagey in June last year to discuss a new agenda for Europe, that just some months later we would find ourselves in a completely different reality, which would turn upside down many of the assumptions underlying our forecasts and plans. It has in fact been almost half a year now since the virus hit Europe, and lockdown measures were adopted in most member states. Our countries are going through unprecedented times. The pandemic is having a terrible impact in terms of human lives, and we are facing very complex challenges. Learning the lessons from the past, this time around, I think that Europe has stood up to the challenge and put in place in record time a very strong response, not only on the sanitary front, but also to preserve our economies and our societies and to ensure a fast recovery. It is clear that the fight against the pandemic is not over, and the current economic situation is still marked by very high uncertainty. We still have difficult times ahead. But thanks to the intense work undertaken from day one at the national and European level, we have come a long way in shaping the economic response to the crisis. In the first instance, we acted to ensure financial stability, to protect liquidity flows to the whole economy, to minimise the damage in labour markets and to preserve household income. This phase can be described as one of resistance. This fast and coordinated response has been key, I think, to protect a solid basis on which to build the recovery and avoid a more structural and long-standing damage, which would have been much more difficult to heal. To give you some examples, in Spain we increased the flexibility and public support for short-term work schemes, a mechanism which had not worked in the country before and is proving this time around to be extremely effective to protect more than 3 million jobs, avoiding the massive layoffs which took place in previous, much less intense economic downturns. We also activated a 100 billion euros public guarantee line that has already mobilised almost that amount in credit, mostly benefiting small and medium-sized enterprises. Moreover, we created a new specific allowance to protect more than 1 million self-employed workers affected by the lockdown. These measures, adopted in the first stage in Spain, amount to around 4% of GDP in additional expenditure and 10% of GDP in liquidity. But beyond these numbers, the counterfactual is one of very serious economic damage, not to speak of the social implications. We estimate that Spain's GDP would have fallen by 25% in 2020, and 3 million jobs would have been lost without this emergency action. There are, of course, differences on the size of the support granted by the different member states, but looking at figures, it is clear that we have all carried out an unprecedented fiscal effort. In parallel with actions at national level, we started to work together on the European response. The sheer size of this crisis that knows no borders requires joint action. Tribute must be paid to all European institutions, starting with the European Central Bank, which has ensured financial stability and thereby enabled national governments to adopt emergency measures. All European institutions acted fast, and I think that their initiative has been instrumental to the progress we have made in a matter of weeks. The temporary state aid framework, the coronavirus response investment initiative, the new short-term liquidity instruments put in place by the Commission, the EIB and the ESM to create a triple safety net for companies, governments and workers have been essential to ensure appropriate funding conditions and also to provide certainty. Certainty is probably the most precious asset in times of turbulence. Amongst these instruments, let me highlight SURE, which for the first time provides support for short-term work schemes and therefore targets employment protection, a backstop for the people. As we gradually started reopening our economies in May, the situation started to improve. In Spain, all available indicators confirmed that there was a turning point in May, and we have moved since then to the second phase, marked by reactivation. If we continue to control the spread of the virus, we are confident that the recovery will take the shape of an asymmetric V, leading to very strong growth in 2021. Our forecast, as well as those of the Independent Fiscal Authority and other analysts, point at GDP growth above 10% already in the third quarter of the current year. In order to support business reopening, economic activity resuming and new job creation, we adjusted in the course of June and July the different measures put in place. We fine-tuned short-term work schemes to incentivize workers' return to their jobs. We have turned our focus to solvency on top of liquidity, with a new public guarantee for investment as well as new instruments to provide capital support to strategic companies. We have adopted specific sector support programs for those most affected, such as tourism, transport or the auto industry. In parallel, unprecedented steps were taken to lay the foundation for a robust European response also for the long run. I am referring, of course, to the adoption of the 2021-2027 multi-annual financial framework and the recovery plan for Europe. The Commission's Next Generation EU proposal was up to the challenge and eventually led to the historical agreement of the European Council in July. From the very beginning, Spain had been calling for a European response so that we could emerge stronger from the crisis. We have put forward a number of proposals and played an actively constructive role, which I hope contributed to facilitating and shaping the final agreement reached after many long hours of work and discussion. I am sure other speakers will talk more in depth about the agreement, but I would really like to highlight this as a very positive, a truly historical step for the future of the Union. It is a European response funded with European debt. We will borrow to invest in our common future. It is commensurate to the challenge, 750 billion euros on top of the MFF. It's focused on grants, an absolutely indispensable element to prevent that excessive debt burdens at national level hinder investment and future growth, and with a special focus on the most affected member states. We have achieved key milestone, but much remains to be done. We are still fighting against the pandemic, although this second wave is so far much less damaging in terms of public health and death levels. The full economic impact will still continue to unfold for some months, as some sectors are still affected by the drop of domestic and global demand. This crisis is accelerating some trends which were already visible but have become a reality in a matter of weeks. Digitalization is a clear example, which has confirmed the strength of our networks, but also exposed the risk of social gaps and rising inequality if we do not act fast, starting with our schooling systems. Adjusting to these new realities has become urgent if we want to ensure that the recovery reaches every region, that no one is left behind. So we need to work hard to implement as soon as possible the national investment and reform plans and to activate the much-needed European recovery funding. We need to be efficient and agile in order to ensure that the economic recovery is strong and sustainable from the financial, environmental and social point of view. With every challenge comes an opportunity, and this time I think we do have a clear plan to seize it, to accelerate the transformation of our economies and to do it together. From the national perspective, we are committed to making the best use of the resources coming from Next Generation EU. We are working on a national recovery, transformation and resilience plan, carrying out a careful exercise of prioritization to ensure the resources are used to promote the transformation processes that the Spanish economy needs. The plan will comprise an ambitious agenda of investments and structural reforms aligned to the priorities of the EU and the European semester recommendations, with 4 key axes: green transition, digital transformation, social and territorial cohesion, and closing the gender gap. We will seek to achieve the maximum possible social and political support at home, working with the private sector, the regions and municipalities and social partners. We are determined to act fast and move quickly towards the third and next stage, the recovery. Implementing the recovery plan will be a top priority for all of us in the coming months, but we should not forget about many other issues that continue to be essential at the European level, such as completing the banking union and the capital markets union and moving forward with fair and effective taxation, including the digital tax. It is clear that the road ahead is still long and full of uncertainties, which I am sure will be discussed at length today. So let me close this introductory statement with 2 final thoughts on the outlook for the next 12 months. First, Economic forecasting is almost mission impossible. But there are a couple of anchors to guide us beyond figures. Our focus should be on kickstarting growth and job creation as soon as possible. We should make sure that investment is protected, and we must act fast and decisively, for our actions today will certainly shape the future of Europe. And secondly, we have more than ever been made aware that we are on the same boat. So we better keep working together to deliver a stronger Europe, well equipped for the future and able to bring solutions and prosperity today and for generations to come. Let me close on this forward-looking note. I wish you all the best for the upcoming discussions at the forum today and look forward to seeing you in person soon. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister Calvino, who was joining us from Madrid. That was an interesting perspective.